This is the 100-Star Quilt, and today I'm going to show you how to make this quilt without using any special rulers, any super special techniques, just stuff that you guys are either familiar with or that you've heard of. Nothing special. So here we go. The thing with this quilt is that it uses two kinds of blocks. One of them is a simple 4-patch, and you can see that right here. 2 of color, 2 of background. And then the other block that you're going to learn how to make is using half-square triangles. For most quilters, as you get into quilting, the half-square triangle block is one of the first blocks that you learn how to make. Since quilting has become more popular and quilters have become more innovative, you're gonna see half-square triangles being made in batch, in bulk. So you can make them 2 at a time, or you can make them 4 at a time. You can even make them 8 at a time. I'm going to show you how to do the 2 at a time and the 4 at a time today, because those are, that's what will be most efficient for you to cut in order to make this pattern. Now the 2 at a time half square triangle block is made pretty simply. You have, in this case, a 5-inch square of white background fabric put together with a 5-inch square of color. With them turned faces together, right sides together, you're going to draw a diagonal on the back of your white fabric. Now that solid diagonal is just delineating where the middle of the block is. You're also going to see on either side of that solid line, I have drawn for you dotted lines. Those dotted lines are the ones that you're going to sew on. They are placed 1/4 of an inch on either side of that diagonal. Once you sew 1/4 inch down on either side of the center diagonal, you're going to be able to cut on that solid diagonal, and when you open it up, you end up with a nice sized half square triangle block. You can also do it with the 4 at a time half square triangle method. Now with this one, it's a little bit different. You can see that I drew a solid line all the way around 1/4 inch in from the edge of my block. Again, 5-inch block. That is the line that you're going to stitch on. You'll stitch all the way around all 4 sides to close those 2 pieces of fabric completely together. Once you close them, then the dotted lines going from corner to corner, those are the ones that you're going to cut. Okay, so once they're cut, then you open it out and you have 4 half square triangle blocks. Again, it's very stable, it's very easy and quick to do. This pattern creates the star block using quadrants, and in each quadrant you need 4 half square triangles to put together in order to complete the star. And so making these half square triangle blocks using the 4 at a time method is really efficient, it's super quick, and you end up with a little bit of wiggle room so you can trim up your blocks to make them the size that you need. That's a big difference between doing them 1 at a time and making them in batch like this. When we make our blocks, it's really important to, when we can, to make them a little bit bigger so that they can be trimmed down a little. So for example, you may end up with a half square triangle block completed, finished, that measures 3 inches. What you need for your pattern, and for this pattern especially, but what you may need for any pattern is maybe 2 3/4 inches on your half square triangle block. The fact that your batch blocks came out to be larger than the 2 3/4 is fantastic, because it gives you an opportunity to really square up each one of those half square triangle blocks so that they come out to be the exact all the time. So let's look at the quilt itself. It is made out of 2 different star blocks in addition to the 4-patch. Okay, so for a lot of people, it's kind of hard to see, to deconstruct the blocks, rather, to deconstruct the quilt so that you can see the block and the different block and then the 4-patch. So looking at the quilt back here, you have 1 4-patch here. The color in this one is at the top left, bottom right. If I go to this this 4 patch on the next row, the color is in the bottom left and the top right. They're actually opposite to each other, and that is integral to the placement of your blocks within the quilt when it's time to put them together. When we're looking at our stars, you have a left star and a right star, or star A, star B, however you'd like to put it. This one we're going to call the left star, because if you look at this quadrant right here, the arrows, the bottom triangles, are pointing up to the left. If we look at it down here, the triangles in that bottom left quadrant, the triangles are pointing to the right. So we have this one pointing up to the left. The next row, it's pointing down to the right. So the stars are alternating up to the left, down to the right. Super important. As you make the components, it's so important that you keep track of which direction they're going in, okay? I suggest that you do all the components for the left facing star first, based on however many that you want to make, and then all of the components for the right facing star afterward, so that you can keep track and you don't get them mixed up. Now, what does that mean? When I talk about the components for the stars, there are 4 colors. In this quilt, there are 4 colors in each one of your stars. Coming back to our left facing star, the bottom quadrant is blue, the top left quadrant is teal, the top right is yellow, and the bottom right is red. They're all left facing components, but the components are turned, okay? So they're rotated, which is why they look different, and that's what gives you that star look. So let's look at how to create those components. I have here laid out the components for 2 of your stars. This one is the right star because the bottom component is facing to the right. This one is the left star because the bottom components are facing up to the left. I've done solid, and I also did one that is mixed. So if you are working with fabrics, just scraps from your stash, you may not have enough fabric to do a solid color quarter component. You may have to scrap it up, which is great. I'm going to show you what a super scrappy one looks like, where each one of your half square triangles in your quarter component ends up being different, just like this. But for this quilt, we're working with your quarter star component with all the same color. This one facing down to the right, this one facing up to the left. Now, if you have down to the right, and then you have a solid diagonal of color coming across with your components going up to the left, then you have a solid component of white coming across. I put these 2 scrappies in the same color so that you can see how they differ as they're laid out for block A or for block B. So I just talked about the layout of the blocks. The components that we put together for this block and the quilt that we were working on that I was showing you, each one of the quarter star components is done out of the same colors. So each star itself is made from 4: blue, yellow, light teal, and red. That creates a very scrappy look. However, what's so cool about this pattern is that if you decide that you want to make your quilt out of scraps that you have, you want to work with your stash rather than source from a new bolt of fabric, you know, going and buying a new line, then it's totally doable to do that. Now, the one that's here on the wall kind of mimics what's going to happen with your quilt if you decide to do it in a scrappy, stash busting kind of a way. If I put it right next to another left star, you can see that they are similar in their orientation, just that here I have 4 of the same. Here it's made out of 4 different colors. We're scrappy. 4 different colors makes the quarter star component. What this does for you guys is it makes for a really dazzling quilt. You no longer have a place for your eyes to rest. It allows for your eyes to keep on moving, keep on, ooh, look at that one. Oh, and look at that one. Ooh, those two go together really nicely. You know, there's a lot of discovery that happens in a super scrappy quilt like this. So don't be afraid to mix things up and get kind of creative. Making your blocks out of 4 colors only, that gives a beautiful look, but it also gives your eyes somewhere to rest, because here, that whole component is the same color. Same color. This one, it just dazzles and jumps and makes things a lot of fun. So I encourage you to play with your colors, play with your fabrics, and just have a lot of fun with it. Now that we've talked about the left star and the right star, I'm going to put together one component of the left star to show you how to work that. And with the left star, just as a reminder, the bottom pieces of the left star all point up to the left. That's how I know that it's the left star. The other way that I know is that with the left star is created this diagonal of white. If I was dealing with a right-handed star, then I'd have a diagonal of color. So I have 4 components. They'll eventually go together to make one left-handed star. So it goes together just like a regular 4-patch. These have been put together already. I'm going to put these together so you can see. We can chain sew in this situation. That helps to keep the components, the individual half square triangles for that 1/4 star component together. So I'm going to take these 2, fold one over, take the bottom 2, fold that over, and then run it through the machine using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's very important as you go not to get your pieces out of order, because we do need those 2 distinct stars working. And if you get them out of order, then it's going to be a little confusing. So I have my top edge and my bottom taken care of, and they both look positioned the same as the other components that I have. Normally I would press them open. I'm just going to use my finger and do a quick finger press. Now, as far as pressing goes, you can either press them with your seams open. You know what? I'm going to actually press it because I like it that way. You can either choose to press your seams open or press them in opposite directions. For this quilt, because there are so many seams taking place, I'm going to press them open. When you press your seams open, it allows for easier quilting when that time comes. It reduces the bulk of your seams, and that's what we ultimately want. So I have my 2 seams pressed flat. Now I'm just going to fold it over like this and run this through the machine. I am going to double check to make sure that my seams, my vertical seams, do match up. Pinning is important, pinning is good, but if you feel as though you have a good grasp on the control over your blocks, especially when they're this small, then you can opt to forego your pinning. If you are not quite sure if you're able to keep those seams together like they should be, I highly recommend pinning. That looks pretty fantastic. I'm tickled by that. So I'm going to give it one more press, and I am going to open up this seam. Another option for pressing your seams, if you don't have easy access to an iron or an ironing pad as you're sewing, another option is to use a seam roller. Seam rollers are very cool. I'm working on a quilt right now at home where I use a seam roller the entire time. It is fantastic. Should look into it. I have some in my shop. So here we go. I have 4 components for one left-handed star, okay? So how do we actually come to the left-hand star right here? Well, it's just a matter of rotating your components to create the star. So I'm going to leave that bottom left component as it is. I'm going to rotate the top left so that my white diagonal, that white strip, is coming down toward the middle. On the yellow, I'm going to rotate it twice so that the white is angling down toward the middle. And then on the blue, I'll go 3 times. So now all of my components are pointing with the diagonals pointing straight into the middle. That is the placement for my left-handed block. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these. This time I am going to pin. The more pieces that you put together, the more components you add in, the more seams that you have working with, super important to go ahead and pin. So I'm going to do that now. When I put my seams together, I check my placement of my vertical seams, and then I'm going to pin on either side of that seam, holding the seam allowance down on both sides. What does that do? Pinning on either side is going to help you avoid your block shifting, okay? The top layer shifting from the bottom layer. It's going to ensure that your seams stay exactly where you wanted them, and that those seam allowances, those pesky seam allowances, don't flip back and forth as it's running through the machine. So it's just kind of a security policy, an insurance policy. Can you guys see that? I put in 4 pins, 1, 2, 3, and 4, to make sure that everything is down and secure. Okay, so I'm going to put it in. Now that I have all 4 pins in both my top pair and my bottom pair, I'm going to just run it through the machine. Now, as you can see, yes, I did run over my pins. I left my pins in. Why? Because I didn't want my center seam to shift as I was going along. How did I do that without causing any issue? I went over those pins slowly. If you're going slowly over your pins, you have less of an opportunity, less of a chance to break a needle, bend a pin. If it's a situation where you can avoid leaving your pins in, I highly recommend doing that. But in the case of the center seams where you want everything to stay put, I usually keep my pin in. Okay, so I open it up to double check and make sure that everything is in the right place. As I'm going through the quilt, I want to lay it out and make sure that I'm actually sewing it in the right direction and that I'm not misplacing any of my parts. With so many moving parts and so many different ways that they can lay, it's easy to get confused. And so I'm going to constantly check myself to make sure that I'm not making any mistake. Don't be afraid to pull seams out, but I'm going to check myself just to make sure. And I did. Everything's going in the correct direction. I like that. So I'm going to press my seam open again. I did my pressing, got everything flat, so now I can fold this one over and do my pinning again. Lots and lots of pinning. All right. Ooh, that looks pretty good. What you can see is that my star is all put together, and this is my left component star. The bottom left quarter star is in that left component, and they all rotated in toward the middle to create this star. So the two different stars, and you can see just in this blue section that they are turned in different ways, right? To look at it in the quilt itself, your left star is this one with these two bottom components going up. Your right star is this one with the two bottom components facing down. The right facing star gets the 4 patch right beside it with the color in the right, top right corner. The left facing star gets the 4 patch with the color in the top left. So each row of the quilt is put together one orientation of 4 patch with its corresponding star. The next row gets another orientation of 4 patch with its corresponding star. And when you do that, what you end up with is this little layout here. So I have my left star here and I have my right star here, and please forgive, this one is a little bit bigger. It was made at a different time. But you get the concept. With my left star, my color is in my top left, and with my right star, my color is in my top right. You're looking for these hunter arrows. Here's one in white, and you have the little zigzag. It almost looks like a fish. And then right across from it, you have it in the Scrappy color, okay? So we're looking at 2 hunter arrows butted up against each other, a white and a color. More information about the pattern is going to be linked in the description below. And you'll also find in the description below a link to my shop where you can find these fabrics. I used Riley Blake's Indigo Garden for this quilt, and I think the colors are really nice. There's that pop of darker shades plus the gentle lighter shades, and it all works beautifully together. So if you're interested in this fabric, you can find it in my shop and the link is below. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe for more quilting tutorials. See you in the next one.